Hey, just testing to see if everyone can hear me.
You are good. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, thank you. We got the IT dilemma resolved. I'll be back when we get started. Thank you, Paige.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to give a couple more minutes and just be mindful of everybody's time. I will get started on time. I know all of you have joined early, so we're just going to give it a couple more minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started. Well, good evening, everyone. I am going to go ahead and get started. My name is Paige Singer, and I am Division Manager for Recreation, Parks, and Cultural Affairs with DeKalb County. I'm here joined tonight with Commissioner Patrick with District 1. And we are here to present the final draft of the master plan concept report for the Mercer University Trail Study. And we're very excited to be here. I know a lot of you have been waiting very patiently for the final plan. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And then we're going to go through a couple of housekeeping items as we go through, since this is a virtual meeting. Okay. So some of the things that we're going to go through tonight is the planning process, sort of how we arrived at what we are. As I was preparing for this meeting, and I know that some of you know me, some of you don't, and up until now, sort of Pat has taken the lead on some of the stakeholder meetings and the presentations. But I'm excited to be here with y'all tonight because I think we can shed some light from a county perspective on how we arrived here, the groundwork, the scope that Path prepared, the goals and objectives, kind of how we came up with those. I think we can maybe shed some light on that, add some further detail. I know that there's been a lot of feedback surrounding this particular study. So I'm super excited to be here with y'all, kind of give you a high level view, not only just the plan, the detail itself, but just kind of the process that we as a county and as a department take when we prepare these plans. We're also going to talk about all the summary of the items of the feedback that we did get. It is typical for us to do 3 meetings. It is, so having a 4th meeting, and again, that's also why I'm here, is we did add this one in because we did get so much feedback. And that is one of the biggest goals that we have as a department, is to hear from all of you that live in this area. And then we're also going to walk through the proposed trail segments. And I'm going to take a big pause when we get there because I want to talk about next steps. Again, just as kind of focus on the fact that this is a plan. It came out of an idea. And then the next thing we do is we get a plan together. And then once the plan is finalized, we can move into those next steps. And then, of course, that's number 5. We're going to talk about what next steps are. This is just such a small percentage of the overall design and construction of the project.
Paige, if I could just add in briefly, the importance of having this 4th meeting was that the residents were engaged and that we did want to try and take all of those different opinions, all of those different perspectives, and come up with something that we believed would be representative and reflect the interests and the concerns that some residents had.
Thank you. And that was where I was heading next, Commissioner, is to introduce our team. Unfortunately, Caleb could not be here tonight. I know that some of y'all are familiar with him from the other 3 meetings. So again, I'm taking his place, but I have been involved as well. And then our director, Chuck Ellis, the RPCA director, and then of course, Commissioner Patrick, who has been integral to this process. And thank you for that. That is one of the main reasons that we did add the 4th meeting. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Not at this time. Again, thank you for your staff's efforts on this. Having a 4th meeting was not really what was in the plan. But again, I think at the end of the day, leaning on the residents and sort of giving them that extra attention and effort that they required and expected, I think that's appropriate. So thank you very much for the efforts that we had to go through to get to here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So again, the purpose of this meeting, it's really just for us to have a conversation about the final plan. To me, a great way to sort of capture what we've done and the groundwork that's been laid is to go where we started, how we got there, and then where we're going to end up. And then that's where we're going to share the next steps with you. So again, this is just a very small piece. The final report, we're going to run through it. I want to give a lot of time at the end for any feedback and questions that y'all may have. So just a couple housekeeping things because this is a virtual meeting. And one of the decisions to make this a virtual meeting, as you can see, I actually have 78 participants on this call, which is tremendous for us. And it's just a great way for us to share the plan with you. We're still open to taking feedback, but because we've had these 3 previous meetings where it was integral for all of that feedback to be captured and there were surveys and the pigeonhole and all that, that's not really part of this meeting. This meeting, the goal is to really just present the final plan as is. So what we're going to ask you to do is that all questions are going to be answered live. We can do one of 2 things. You can go either into the Q&A and post your question there, or you can post it into the chat. And then what I'll do at the very end of the presentation. I'll go through just as many as we can. This is also being recorded. And then I also will have this presentation itself that will be available on our website. I do want to add that we try to get these typically posted on our website very quickly after the meeting. It's usually a highly requested thing, a copy of the recording, a copy of the presentation. So I am going to add that 2 of the people that are integral to that process are on medical leave right now. So just please give me a little bit of extra time. I promise you it will be on our website. And both of those, the recording and the presentation, but it's just going to take a little bit longer than usual. So just please be patient. And then again, if you're not really familiar with Zoom, down at the bottom, you have the Q&A little function here, and then the chat function. And again, I'll be kind of reading both of those. And one of the reasons I'm going to wait till the end is I think pretty familiar with the feedback we've been getting. So I'm kind of hoping that we can answer some of those questions as we go through the presentation itself. All right, so let's get started. So one of the places I wanted to start was kind of how this came to fruition. That question I feel like has been asked a lot. And again, up until now, y'all have heard from the Path Foundation. So I want to just make sure that we're all clear on how we get any project started. And this is just typical to us as a county department. And really, this came out as an idea that there is an opportunity to connect basically to Gwinnett County with a multi-use trail through North Peachtree Creek. And that it's sort of this desert area, and I know you've heard that term up until now, and that's kind of how all this got started. So what we do as a department is we will engage one of our consultants that we feel is appropriate for the project. And Path just seemed to be a natural fit. So that's what we did as a department, that we go to them, to the consultant. We have a conversation, they'll draft a proposal, and that's sort of what prompts the entire process from there. And out of that process is when we start talking about working groups, gathering people from the neighborhood, from businesses, elected officials, the department. And then what I think is important and what Path did, which I typically will do with any consultant, is we try to define what the expectations are, and what the goals are and the objectives for not only us as a department, but also it involves Mercer's campus. It involves District 1, and then it involves the residents and the community that surrounds it. So this is what we came up with. These are the goals of the study that we were looking to accomplish, and then these were the desired outcomes. And basically, as we go through the process with the different stakeholders, we kind of, we'll check in from time to time to make sure that what we're furthering is in line with these. I do know that there's been several questions about why are these paved paths? And so I want to pause here just a little bit to talk about that. It was a decision that this was to be a multi-use trail. And when we use that term multi-use, that's going to be infrastructure. It's going to be concrete or asphalt or boardwalk. A natural trail brings on a whole set of different tasks associated with it. And what was tasked here to Path was to provide that multi-use trail connection. And so basically the goals of this study is what you see in front of you. It also took into consideration the existing master plan, and we're going to talk about that a little bit further, that Mercer had already implemented. It was to reconnect neighborhoods that is sort of in this desert area that I mentioned. And the reason it is a multi-use trail is it's transportation related. It's enabling and providing an alternate method of transportation for bicyclists and pedestrians. And then again, it has that connection to Gwinnett County. That's your regional trail connection. So those are what the working group, the department, District 1, that's kind of what we came up with as a group to have those goals included in this study. And then the desired outcomes, these are sort of what we call measurable outcomes. It's providing neighbors access to the ecological areas of Mercer's campus. It's enhancing physical, mental, and social well-being through outdoor recreation. That's why Parks is here. It's included in our mission statement as a department. It's empowering people with challenges to enjoy the benefits of trails. And again, those all are encompassed in that multi-use trail aspect. It's also to provide environmental education for residents, for students, and then it's also to address the security and privacy of the residents who are going to live around these trails. And so this is what we came up with as a group, as the working group. Path is the expert, and then elected official. So this is the area that we've defined. So again, we're sort of back to those initial conversations of why are we here? What are the goals? And we need to have a defined area. So this took a lot of doing. I know there was a few iterations that the commissioner and I actually looked at when we started this, and it definitely morphed. So just so everybody knows, there's a lot of thought process that goes behind this. And this is the defined area that we came up with. Basically 85, which borders on I'm going to get my directions wrong, on the west, 285 on the east, and then keeping it within District 1. This is where the study area that we came up with, Henderson Mill Creek on the south. So this was the study area that we included in the study. And what that means is this is really where we're going to focus our efforts when we do all of our field visits and the site work. And then the next thing that we do, and this is something that we're even implementing in our Trails Comprehensive Master Plan, is looking at destinations within the study area. They're also maybe known as activity centers. So they could be downtown areas, they could be schools, they could be parks. And that's what we've identified here on the map. The orange is destinations within the study area. And then we also look at destinations of outside the study area, again, because these are trail connections. We want to make sure that we're connecting people to places. And then we're also looking at the residents that are living within walking distance and biking distance. So again, back to that multi-use trail, providing those connections to those trail access points. So you can see those are on green on this map, and then highlighting how many residents would be impacted or affected by these trails. And Commissioner, I saw you come off of mute. Did you want to add something?
I just wanted to add that, those destinations in my mind is one of the leading benefits of this trail discussion, which is the ability, if you wanted to get out on a nice path and be able to walk to the grocery store, potentially walk if you play tennis, walk up to the tennis courts that they have near Presidential Parkway Hotel. Of course, we've been working on the redevelopment of the Presidential Parkway Hotel. And so by including these different locations, including the movie theater, there are different destination points that I think members within the community would appreciate. Parking was a concern. We didn't want to have people parking on residential streets where it was difficult for people to be able to come and go. And so we sort of pushed the idea a little bit. Well, the parking lot over at Regal is vast. It's huge. And even if there were, 50 or 100 people that were coming to drive over to that location, it's not going to impact the neighborhood. The residents would not necessarily be impacted with all of those additional vehicles parked on the streets. And that was another effort to sort of acknowledge and engage with the concerns that the residents had expressed.
Thank you for that. That's exactly right. Very well stated. And so what the next steps are is looking at the possible trail connection. So this is when anything goes. We've identified the potential residents that would use the trail. We've also now identified those activity centers, those destinations. We have representation within the working group, which also includes Mercer representatives as well. And so now we really start looking at existing conditions. We look at possible routes. And here I want to just pause now to kind of talk about that. Because this is a plan, it's a concept. The plan that you see in front of you and the final plan is exactly that, and it's not constructible. We run into this a lot of time with parks master plans, that I think when people see a plan, they think that means the next step is construction, and that is not the case. Again, this is a concept report. It's a scoping study. Path and other representatives did walk the site. I mean, getting that dimensional picture is always the best way to go. We'll walk the topography, we'll identify some of those challenges, but I want to be clear that that did not include any kind of a survey. And that's going to be included in the next steps. So again, just remember that we started with an idea. We started with this idea of providing a multi-use trail in this study area. Then we took that idea and now we're massaging it. We're going to start getting that feedback. We've identified the destinations, and now we're going to put our eyes on it and try to come up with the best plan that we can with the information we have. And that's where we are. So the next step is to start meeting with our broader stakeholder group. And so we had these 3 meetings scheduled. And as I stated, typically we do 2 meetings, but because of just the outpour of feedback that we had, we really felt it crucial to have an additional meeting. And so these took place in a public open house forum. There were surveys that were presented, there were informational boards, and I remember there being a pigeonhole, and that's where we're asking you questions. We're asking you questions as a community on, would you use this trail? What are your concerns about the trail? Where do you like to go? Do you like to spend time in parks? And all of that is just, or on trails, not, I'm sorry, I'm so park mode focused, but all of that information is really crucial to know where we're going to go, where we want to get to from this trail. And then we'll take all of that information, and PATH uses all of that information based on their expertise about all the field work that they've done and the destinations and that study area, and then they'll start working some plans. And so that's where we're going to go next. So this is some of the feedback that we heard. That there are benefits of the proposed trail. People love having connections within their neighborhood. It's again providing a place that's, when we talk about safety, it's protecting pedestrians from traffic or cyclists from traffic. That's always a big advantage of having an isolated, defined path area. And also, it's like Commissioner just stated, it's giving you an alternate to driving. So it's giving you that recreational opportunity to get to those destinations. But then there's a lot of concerns. Increase in crime is one of them. We did hear that a lot. A loss of privacy, damage to the environment, because again, we understand that this is infrastructure that's going in. And then also, I guess the benefit or lack of benefit to the community itself. And so, Commissioner, I saw you take off of remute again.
I did, and just wanted to re-acknowledge that the items that you've read out: increased crime, loss of privacy, damage to environment, and the perception of the overall benefit to the community, those were all concerns. And so when we get to that phase that shows all of the different potential locations of the path, that is, those concerns that were mentioned is what helped pull back in certain locations. And just want to make sure that everyone's aware that we were listening to the concerns that were being raised.
Okay. So this is where we started. And I think it's important, as Commissioner stated, to remember, I mean, again, this was very broad, looking at all of the possible trail connections. And that's what you see here in the red dots. And this is what was shared in one of those stakeholder meetings. And again, as Commissioner stated, a lot of concerns were raised. Parking in the neighborhoods was definitely incredibly high on that list. How are we going to control that? People coming into your neighborhood that don't live in the neighborhood, that was definitely potential risk that we heard, that we wanted to address. So again, what you're looking at now is taking that broad level bird's eye view, this anything is possible, but then we will apply all of that feedback that we got and sort of address the concerns when we presented this at the second meeting. So this was the result of those concerns, and we wanted to be specific, because again, there were some very specific concerns that everyone had brought to our attention. So in the final plan, and again, this is the final plan, the Cravey Trail Spur has been removed. And you can see on the figure up in the right-hand corner with the X's that we have removed all of the sections going into the neighborhoods to sort of offset that concern about parking. The Henderson Mill Creek Trail east of Hollinswood Drive and Rangewood Trail, that spur has also been removed. And then the Flowers Road and Henderson Mill Road side path, they were added to make a trail connection from Peachtree Creek Greenway to Henderson Middle School. So there was an addition, but going into the neighborhoods again, we heard you. The commissioner, we discussed it, and again, sometimes the concerns, they outweigh the benefits. And so I think the parking to us was of great concern. And so those have been removed from the plan.
Paige, if I could also add, one of the members of the steering committee also had concerns after talking with her neighbors about some of those locations, which also contributed or got us to the conclusion that we need to be a little more mindful of what the concerns of the residents were than what we already were paying attention to. So again, very, very cognitive of the concerns that were being raised. I remember I actually know one of the families that lives there, and they had concerns with their kids being in the area and the potential for people parking in the area and walking around. And so we acknowledged that, and that was us addressing sort of the security concerns that were raised during these discussions.
And I want to go through some of these top perspectives, negative and positive, sort of one by one. I feel like this is a lot. This is the biggest reason why we're here tonight. And the first one that I see on the negative perspective is the value to the public. And again, it is a concern. We do look at that. We look at the feasibility of, is the value to the public worth some of the risks that we're taking? I think the ecological impacts is extremely important. We're parks. I tell everybody that. So we're valuing green space is for this department, for me personally, and for our division is very crucial. And it's always a challenge. You want to provide that access to nature. You want to have those educational components that are integrated. But again, it does with constraints. I want to make sure, because this goes back to us being in the final plan, that during the engineering phase is when, and this is when I'm going to kind of talk about sort of next steps a little bit here, is when the surveys take place. It's when we look at wetland delineation. It's when we look at floodway. It's when we look at permitting and code. We are bound to DeKalb County code. We are also bound to state and federal core regulations. So no construction is going to take place in a wetland, in a floodplain, without us going through proper permitting process. And again, all of that is looked much more closely in the engineering phase. And more times than not, we're going to move some of these trail locations based on what we're going to find based on those surveys. That also does include a tree survey. Typically, it's 6-inch in caliper and higher, so that's the density of the trees. If we need to reroute some of the trail in order to save trees, we do that. Again, we're parks. In other instances, we have narrowed the trail because we don't need 12-foot. That's also an option. There's so many options out there for us to mitigate some of the environmental impacts that we're going to have. And know that we take that not just in consideration, but it's actually part of our design. All of our plans are permitted through DeKalb County. We have continuous meetings with all of the various departments that are part of planning and sustainability. That includes the flood plan management and environmental review. That's part of our permit process. And a lot of people don't realize, and I always like to kind of add this in, that 99% of parks are in floodplains and floodways. It's cheap land. And so we're very familiar with doing construction projects and having those limitations and coming up with some options, and also sort of integrating the wonderful part of the environment into infrastructure. I think that's where we really excel. And that's where I'm really excited that we're part of the Greenways project now. And then again, aesthetics, I think that goes to what I just talked about, having some options. It doesn't always have to be concrete. We can do some more natural looking elements out there. I do want to add here, because I did talk about some soft surface, and I think that's been a big question we've been getting asked a lot, is mulch an option? So my thing about mulch is two things. Mulch is considered fill material. So there's just as much code and regulations over bringing fill material into these sensitive areas as there is bringing concrete or asphalt. The second thing about mulch is it comes from trees. So again, lessening those environmental impacts is something that we want to take into consideration. So again, these are all things that we'll look at when we come to that design phase. But again, this is just the plan. And then once we get into engineering, we're subject to all of those codes. Another thing that we get questioned a lot is security, lighting, call boxes. So I want to state this very early on and upfront, is that we are parks, we're not public safety, we're not PD, and I'm going to leave those experts in handling security. If something happens in any neighborhood, in any park, you need to call 911. So I'm not going to speak for that department. I think it's critical and crucial that there is a clear delineation between us and them. And I'm not going to speak for them in any capacity. And again, lighting though is something different. When you're talking about lighting, and that goes back to aesthetics and environmental, there's ways that you can incorporate lighting designs into any space or park space and be mindful of that. And that's something that we need to move towards. Darkness, I think, has some positive, but again, we do understand the concern for that negative activity. And then again, privacy. And I know that this was a concern about having those distances between the people's backyards and then where the trail is going to go. And again, I think there's a lot of different opportunity here that we can look at once we get into that engineering phase, once we have the actual alignment set. Because again, this is a plan, this is a concept. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and move on.
Yep. If I could just add, I want to
Okay.
acknowledge that people are dropping comments in the chat and the Q&A.
Yes.
And our plan is to circle around towards the end of the presentation and then have those questions answered.
Okay. So once we incorporated all of this feedback, we had removed the sections that were sort of causing a lot of the issues and the concerns. This is the final plan as it stands now that we're ready to share with everyone. It basically consists of 4 segments that are labeled here, P, M, E, and H. And then the next couple slides are going to kind of isolate each of these sections. So the first section is the P section. This is really a great connector piece. It's connecting the North Peachtree Greenway through Mercer's campus and then up to the north. One thing that did arise, and as I mentioned before, because even the North Peachtree Creek it was just a scoping study, is while we were doing this plan, it actually provided a better opportunity to move that section of the Peachtree on the other side. So again, things are still being massaged as we go through these plans. But P is one of the sections that is incorporated into the final plan. The next section is M, and this is the connection that's going to come from North Peachtree Greenway up through Mercer's campus, through the Warren Tech School.
Mm-hmm. And Paige, if I can add, this proposal or scoping study that we have, residents will be able to look at a GIS map that through another project I was working on that shows where the existing sidewalk network is. And the goal is sort of to be able to fill in those missing spots and get connectivity overall, whether it's through the trail or through an existing sidewalk. That's the overall plan, even beyond what we're sort of discussing here in the scoping phase of our planning.
And then H, as you can see here, which is, see, it comes from Henderson Middle School. I wish we had a better description other than H. We probably need to call these something a little more clever. And then this is the connection that's going to go into Gwinnett County. So again, these are all connection pieces, and we felt that they were priorities. And then E is that final connection from Mercer into the Embry Village Shopping Center. This is the E section. And so as we start talking about phasing and sort of next steps, that's why these are sort of delineated into each different section. And Commissioner, I also think you raised a good point, and I did want to add, and I'll also make a plug for our comprehensive trails plan as a county that's still in process. I do think there has been a little bit of confusion because this was running at the same time. So basically what's happening is the comprehensive trails plan is a very high level plan for the entire county. One of the goals of that plan is not only regional connections, but then also sort of completing the initial master plan that the county adopted in the 1990s. So I think there was a lot of questions when we presented that vision network is why don't we see Mercer there? It didn't get that granular. And to Commissioner's point is that, these are sort of, we're isolating sections. That's why we're able to do this on its own. But then it does provide that broader connection, and it's in that comprehensive trails plan. And all of this leads into the county's transportation plan that is led by transportation and planning and sustainability. So there's a lot of crossover between these plans. But this is just sort of that study area, which is where we are now.
I also want to add, when I first was elected as county commissioner, of all the areas within unincorporated District 1, it looked like Embry Hills was an area that had not gotten a lot of attention. And I thought that an investment such as this in the Embry Hills and eventually North Crest area would be good ways to show that the county is engaged in paying attention to needs of the community, as well as wanting to make sure that this is still the desirable place that it is to live. So at some point, we're all going to move out of our houses, get downsized one way or another, and we want to be able to make sure that those housing values are still good, and that wherever you go in the next steps of life, you've got a little bit more of a nest egg built up for that step.
Great. So one of the slides that we've added in here, as I mentioned before, is where are we and where do we go? So where we are right now is this tiny little beginning spot, which is the feasibility study, the concept report. This is really just the very beginning groundwork for what comes next. The big portion of this entire project is construction. Any project, capital project that we undertake, construction is a good 75 to 80% of the whole project. That is really where the money comes in, and it's where a lot of the coordination, administration comes in. The design engineering comes in between those two things. So basically, we're going to take this feasibility study. The next step is to engage an architecture and engineering company. And what they will do is they will do a survey, and that is going to include utilities. It's going to include topography. It's going to include tree survey. It's going to include anything and everything. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow them to create an alignment. The alignment is going to be based on this plan. But again, without sort of that 3D modeling, it's not tied to anything. And that's why the survey is giving you that three-dimensional, where it's really taking this plan and it's tying it to something. And that is just so crucial in that next step. That's going to allow us to adjust and really bring it to reality. Once the engineering is completed, and usually there's milestones built into that, usually we'll request sort of a 30% submittal, which is including a site plan. So that's going to have your alignment. Then we usually do like a 60% where the profiles are set, the cross sections are set of the trail. And then the 90% plans have all those sort of construction details. And this is a very large project. Even just one section is going to be a very large project. Once those construction documents are completed, they're stamped, they're sealed, and they're submitted for permitting. And it may require permits from not only DeKalb County, but also the Corps and also the state. And that's something that we work with the engineering company on. Our engineers are all licensed. They are well versed in this. And so that's where this all comes together. So again, we're very, very early on in the feasibility and in this concept report. And then the next step is really the engineering. Then once everything is permitted, we're ready for construction. So again, we are a ways away from sort of having, we call them boots on the ground, or seeing, the dirt start to fly. So, but that's just a little bit about where we are, and then sort of that big step. So the next step, for the immediate next step for us, is sort of taking this concept report, assigning it to one of our engineers, and getting that much needed survey completed. That's really the immediate next steps that we will take as a department.
Paige, if I can just reiterate what you've already said several times. Again, this is a scoping study, and at the end of the day, topography is going to sort of dictate the realities of where things can be.
Yes. Okay. So here, and again, this is we call them like rough order magnitude cost, probable opinion of cost. This is even rougher than that. So what we have built here is the phasing that we are considering, with the mileage, potential completion date, and then an estimated cost. And again, this is just very preliminary. It's just to kind of give a rough idea of how this could be phased. Again, once we get that survey information and we engage the engineer, it could really change a lot. I have yet to be involved in a master plan or any concept report that ended exactly where we started. That's, again, survey is crucial. And so again, this is just sort of a rough estimate, and that you can see that even just the phase one, if everything were to line up, that we would not be completion until 2028. Typical timeline for engineering is going to take about 9 to 12 months, depending on the length. Sometimes our permitting can take up to a year. If there's acquisition involved, that's also going to add another layer to this whole process. Usually what will happen is when we sort of get to that 30–50% submittal for engineering, they're better able to give us a more realistic opinion of cost. So that's where I would really take this cost with a grain of salt. Usually how they come up with these costs is it's based on market value per mile, but it doesn't really take into consideration all of the elements for this specific section of trail in these certain conditions. So just keep that in mind. These are very, very broad numbers. And then this has been divided within 6 phases, and the last phase being completed in 2036. So again, we are still just in the very, very, very beginning stages of this project.
Again, Paige, just to go back to topography will tell the reality of what the project expectations are and what the cost will be. The other thing I wanted to add in is, so when I was a Doraville City Councilman, there were conversations about the Peach Pass lanes being able to support bus rapid transit. That conversation sort of extended into having a trail system that parallels 285. And so it's possible, particularly for segment 4B and 4A, that there may be other funding agencies that are working in the area trying to build out a larger trail network that this will tie into that may offer some funding options as we go through the process. And so the other thing to keep in mind is again, we're just at the beginning. We're not aware of all the potential funding sources that could be out there. Of course, the federal government, state government, SPLOST, but these are all a matter of things that as we flesh out the plan and then we move forward, they will sort of become realized as we have these conversations.
That is absolutely correct. And that's another reason I wanted to share, I think probably everybody, why do you have so many phases? But again, it's because it's unlikely that we would ever get all of the money to do all of the engineering or all of the money to do the construction. So oftentimes we're approached of, hey, do you have a project? And okay, we do. How much money do you have, right?
Mhm.
Or we're going to go after a grant and it has limitations or matches or something. And that's why we try to break this into as many possible options that we think is feasible. The other thing I like to do, because the engineering is such a small portion, the feasibility is even a smaller percentage, but having as much included in the engineering as possible. So if we do get construction dollars, we already have those sets of plans prepared. And I know Commissioner is used to that with me, but that's another way that we try to tackle some of these so that's why we start with this concept, because it's much more affordable to include all of this in this concept report now. And then we sort of tackle the engineering next, and then we start tackling the construction. It just gives us a lot of opportunity for funds and a lot of opportunity for some really great projects.
And oftentimes when there's an economic downturn and the federal government wants to do local projects that help stimulate growth, that phrase shovel-ready projects is where this is where we're trying to get positioned for.
Absolutely. So again, we talked about those next immediate steps, talking about getting the design and the engineering started. I also do want to add that we do engage the community during those types. I don't want you to think that this is the last time you're going to hear from us. So I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to construction, I think, for us, because we are working in because again, I work in parks all the time. We've got the surrounding adjacent neighbors, and a lot of times we will communicate construction schedules, and all of that. So again, it's not like this is going to be done and then you're never going to hear from us, or, that's not how this goes. Again, this is just presenting that sort of final plan, and then the next step for design and engineering. And then this is really where we work very closely with our elected official and with commissioner, because we want to make sure that we're reaching out as needed, and he always will forward us, and vice versa, any concerns or any questions about where we are within the process. Okay, so I went a little bit over where I wanted to go over, but we've got about 20 minutes to go through some questions and answers, and I already see some of them coming in. So let me go ahead. I'm going to open the Q&A first, and then we will get going. So first question is, how do you measure or quantify biking distance? Great question. So I'm gonna have to defer to Path on that. I'm not as well versed with the on those types of things. If I were to guess, I think there's all sorts of I've just kind of learned this recently, is there's all sorts of metrics that are used to generate proposed trips once paths are created. So I'm assuming that there's some sort of, it's a benefit cost analysis where sort of if you build it, they will come. And that's sort of, there's going to be a metric. And again, I'm going to download all these questions and I will try to get a better answer for you because I know that that didn't quite answer your question. Um,
I can take the
let's,
next one.
oh,
From
great. Okay.
Regal Cinema announced that they will be closing that location. That is correct, and I've already been contacted by a developer who is interested in redeveloping the property. I have asked them to go back and come back with something a little bit different, something a little more inspiring. That portion of DeKalb County, or that stretch of District 1, is an area that was built out, I think, probably back in the 60s and 70s. I know the movie theater itself was built in the 90s. I actually went to the last drive-in movie theater that they had there. But that area is, people are looking at it with the idea of redeveloping it into some type of residential. And that brings up the conversation of how are you going to have connectivity to the trail, which I think is going to be a very important conversation to have when it comes to redevelopment in that area. People want to see what the amenities are that are offered in any neighborhood. And I believe that this trail system will be one of the amenities that people enjoy and appreciate.
Okay, so I think the next two questions, I know they might be far reaching, but they go hand in hand, but I think they do. So one of the questions is because we did mention the Regal Cinema as a activity center, and then
Mhm.
they think the next question is, y'all did move the thing. So again, this is a dynamic plan. We have to finalize it at some point, and it's a plan. So once we engage the engineering company, we're going to look at all alternatives. So just know that yes, things are always going to be changing. That's the nature of what we do every day. And so we will adjust. And basically, a lot of that initial alignment is going to take into consideration things that have changed from the plan until now. So do know this is a dynamic plan. It doesn't just go on a shelf. That's not what happens. It's used in order to further these next steps. So all of that will be taken into consideration during the design phase.
I'd like to also add, Paige, the three properties. I think it's 33, 55, 75, and 95 Northeast Expressway. Those went through a rezoning about a year and a half ago for residential redevelopment. And there was also conversations at the time with the developer who expressed some interest in having connectivity tied into that trail network. So again, as Paige said, the scoping plan is just a static reflection of time right now. As realities move forward with redevelopment opportunities in the area, it will sort of adjust to reflect the realities of what our possibilities are.
Thank you. The next question was questioning about the FBI facility located on Mercer's campus. Yeah, any parties that we would need to involve we'll make sure of that. Again, there's still, as Commissioner stated, even with the Regal Cinema, there's a lot of coordination that needs to be made. We will not move forward until all of that is fine-tuned.
Mhm.
Let's see. We talked about the Regal properties. So here's a question about still basically significant amount of the trail, the plane. So again, this is just a concept report. Do understand the concerns about building infrastructure in a floodplain. I think it's a big conversation that we want to have with the engineering team when they get started, and maybe there is an alternate route that we're missing. Again, that's why I kind of shared those goals and objectives up at the very beginning. We have met those in this plan. And then the next step is really to take this plan and then see maybe there is a better route. A lot of times, the proposed plan trail segments will be moved. If we can get out of the floodplain, it's doing everybody a favor. So know that we get that. The permitting to construct in the floodplain is pretty tremendous. So that definitely needs to be taken into consideration.
And again, this goes back to what we've been saying. Topography will dictate reality when it comes to the trails.
Correct. Okay. Let's see. Another about the cinema close. I didn't even know the cinema was closing. Tells you how
I know.
infrequently I get out these days. Okay, let's see. A question about Mercer. So again, this is sort of the same question with the FBI and even us easements that we need to be acquired. So any of those things we're required to. That's a requirement of any if we need to buy actual property, if we're buying easements, that will be in the proposal with the engineering company. They will be looking at all sections because again, some areas might need to be rerouted because acquisition or an easement is not possible. All of those things will be taken into consideration. We do quite a few acquisitions with our green space office. We're still buying park land, so I know a lot of the challenges. I've worked with easements, and trust me, we're gonna try to figure out best moving forward. Again, we don't look at all of those things when we're going through the concept report. The concept report is really just a map of what could be. Let's see. Topography. So this is talking about trees, and yes, like I said, it's a requirement for us again with permitting to survey trees 6 inches and over, and also to identify the hardwood itself. The other thing the county has implemented is a no net tree loss. So what will happen is if there are any trees lost, which we will avoid altogether, we will have to recompense them in the project area. I want to also make that clear. But what we'll do is we can, again, adjust the route accordingly. We have done this. We do it all the time. What happens even before we do the survey is we will actually stake the trail. Those are going to set what the survey points are going to come back. And so once we have the tree information is going to come first, then we'll stake it. And then what'll happen is we'll overlay those stakings with the tree plan. The other thing that we try to do is even if we're close to a tree, we're going to try to save it. We've been pretty successful just to kind of cut the roots and monitor. But again, all of those things we're going to be taken into consideration when we do the survey and when we actually stake the trail alignment.
If I could just add to that page, up in the Dunwoody at Brook Run Park, uh, a beautiful park. They've installed a trail loop that is fairly extensive in the park, and they were very mindful about the trees as well. There are situations where a tree does have to be removed, but I think the overall product that the residents enjoy is a park that everyone comes out to fairly regularly. It's a very well used park in the Dunwoody area, and sort of look to have that same expectation reproduced here with this trail network discussion.
And then a great question from a citizen. So actually sort of reverse of that because we did remove the access points from the neighborhoods is talking about that you're right, it would not provide direct access from neighborhoods. So again, we can look more closely at that, but yes, the overall feedback that we had was not to have direct connection through neighborhoods. And so, yes, those sections have been removed. Let's see. So the next one is talking about crime. And again, I'm not police, nor would I want to be. They have a very hard job. So this talks about home invasions. I would have to defer to them on that. There's also a question about police presence. Again, I'm not, I just don't feel comfortable speaking for them. So there's a question about mulch versus using asphalt or concrete and ecological value. I think both have different values. I think that that's what we're talking about is using the appropriate material as it's needed. It is considered fill material. I just wanted to make that clear. I think that it's not an even swap or it's not of any more ecological benefit than not. So I just wanted to be clear about that. Both has their challenges, not only on the material getting through permitting and designing for it, but also on the maintenance side. So again, both have some positive, both have some negative, and those are just two options that we have available to us. It could be something else. I like to call the engineering the next step. It's like we call it TS&L, phase one, where your type, size, and location. And that's really what we're talking about is looking at the alignment That's sort of the location. And then the type is the material, it's the width, that's the TS&L stage. And that's what I like to call it. So all of those things are available options. But again, this is a multi-use trail. So I know bicyclists are not going to be as, able to use it. So again, they both have benefits, they both have negatives. But for this purpose, we're talking about a multi-use trail. Let's see. The next question, will Section P meet the same standards as the rest of Peachtree Creek Greenway? So yes, we're trying to create those standards now in the comprehensive trail plan. That was a heavy part of creating some guidelines for our trail construction. That's going to be incorporated in that, and then those will be applied once that plan is adopted. That actually goes back to what I was just saying, sort of that TS&L stage. And again, we don't want to have a one size fits all, because we do understand that there's some, some sensitive areas that we want to be aware of, and we might lessen the width, or we might change to a boardwalk section. There's just a lot of different alternatives out there.
Again, sort of the realities that we see at the time will dictate what's possible.
Just a couple of questions or a couple comments about just the benefits of trails. And yes, it is all considered infrastructure, and I agree. I think infrastructure is a good thing. A question about the path using some of the existing nature trails or Mercer's campus. Again, this was in coordination with the Hugo master plan that was performed for Mercer. That was taken into account when we did this. So that was one of the goals, was sort of providing connection at that point as well. Another question about the presentation. I guess person joined late. Yes, the presentation and this video will be available on our website. And again, just give me a few more days than it usually takes me to get things up. A question about elevated path, like in the photo behind me. Yes, this is an option. There's a couple good benefits of this. Again, everything has benefits, everything has negative. The benefit of a boardwalk is it is raised. So when in a floodplain, it is pretty advantageous to have that, because we can elevate it and get it out of that high flood water. So yes, that would be an option, just depending on when we get into that engineering. Thank you. I really enjoyed being here with y'all tonight. Let's see, something about the sewer. That's ongoing conversations with watershed management about, again, there's positive and negative about us using sewer easements. One of the biggest negatives is that it's for a reason, and if anything were to happen, it would destroy the path. So that's just something that we have to sort of work on internally about how that would be handled. Yes, we have used porous concrete. This question about using porous concrete, we've used that in some of our parks. Again, there's several alternatives here that could potentially be used to sort of, and again, even bringing more of a natural feel to any kind of a concrete that we put out there. And here's another comment about just the differences between mulch and asphalt concrete, about having it ADA accessible. You're correct. Mulch is a little bit of a slippery, more, not slippery, like a squishy surface for those tires.
All right. Thank you, Laura.
Yes, thank you. Let's see. Next question about the DOT. Do you know?
So I
Yeah,
attended,
but I said I'm not aware of this.
Yeah, sorry, Paige. So I was able to attend several meetings with GDOT, or that GDOT had sponsored. The latest was over at the Embry Hills Library, and there was a conversation discussing that. I don't want to step into GDOT's territory for what they are going to be doing. What I heard was this is a possibility of what's happening, and I had already received an email earlier today with concerns about a particular neighborhood where they're looking to take, I think it was 8 houses, possibly a total of 10 houses altogether that might be involved in the land acquisition. I'll be reaching out to GDOT to get confirmation, but again, what I had heard was this is a possibility, but not a set in stone. That may change, but I will work to see if we can get some more information for those residents and for the rest of you guys that are going to be interested and affected by these new lanes.
Thank you. And then I'm going to put a email up at the very end. You'd asked about a park. I know Commissioner sort of answered your question, but we're always looking for parkland. So if you do have something that you're interested in us taking a look at, we'd be more than happy to look at it. I'm going to give you an email in a minute. You could put that in there. Another question about the Cravey Trail neighborhood connection being eliminated. So again, I don't have the map in front of me, but anything coming into the neighborhood was removed. So there you just need to find an alternate route, I guess, to get to the trail, the main trail.
When we were having some of our conversations about that access point in particular, I think I recall a couple of residents mentioning that they were comfortable walking back there at the end of that stub street to get into some of the other areas on Mercer's property where the trails were. So it may be that that ends up being another access point that sort of locals only know about. If you live in the area, you know about it. If you don't, you don't.
And then the next question about using an alternate along Flowers Road. I couldn't tell you offhand why it was rejected. I'll have a download of the questions and I'll try to find out if they would looked at it and if there was a reason. And then just a great comment about the benefits, and we agree with you. I think it was actually I should have mentioned this right off, is trails are the number one request that came from our Parks Master Plan that we completed in 2020. And we agree, it's just a wonderful benefit to the community to access those destination points and to access parks. We agree, just a wonderful opportunity. All right, but just I'm going to take a couple more. That
Oh,
was the Q&A. I'm going to move to the
Paige,
chat.
before
Yes,
you
go
move
ahead.
over to the patch, to the chat, I just wanted to add, you know, there are a lot of people that have the potential to be served and enjoy the trail system, but we also do want to acknowledge that there were residents who were not comfortable with how close it was going to be in some areas, and that really was the rationale for pulling back where we thought we want to make this as an easy win as possible for the community, as opposed to a hard I got what I wanted and other people took a loss. So when you try and walk that middle path, oftentimes it's very easy to upset both sides. But at the end of the day, I think the notion is if we have a trail that's getting that connectivity from different points, that's the starting of the conversation, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Okay, and you were
Okay.
going to go on over to the chat.
Yeah, so I'm in the chat now, and I'm so a lot of these are repeat, so I'm gonna just highlight maybe some new things. So if I don't mention your comment or question, I just feel like we've previously answered it, so just know that. Let's see. This one is pertinent to Evansdale Elementary not being included as a destination. Again, I will look at that. Right, without having the map in front of me, I have to, so we'll take a look at that and see.
I
And
think
again, that goes back to the Flowers Road, and I see that another question here. If we did consider it and it did get eliminated for a reason, what we'll do is we'll try to get you an answer. If it wasn't under consideration, then what we'll do is I'll bring it back up to the design team once we sort of get into the engineering as a possible connection.
I think just as someone driving down the street, that I noticed that as you get towards Evandale, it looks like, Evansdale Elementary. As you get closer towards that, I think, again, that the concern about getting closer and closer to residential pops up. We just want to be mindful of that conversation um, before we get too deep into it. So,
Okay.
all right.
And then a couple of comments, which thank you for this. I think there's been some comments in regards to the elimination of all the neighborhood access. So I do feel like it's worth mentioning there that there are people that are out there, and thank you for stating that, because I do think that they were eliminated. And again, it is a plan and it is phased, and maybe at some point, sometimes maybe the benefits will be seen and at a much further date down the road. So this isn't a forever plan, as we stated. This is just the plan for now. But I do appreciate you stating how much you enjoy trails, and you're correct. It does limit access directly from the neighborhood. So another, just considering raised boardwalks, and I agree. I think boardwalks have some very good offerings in terms of infrastructure, especially when it comes to floodplain. Aesthetically, I think they tick a lot of those boxes as well. So yes, we actually, when we replaced the one at Mesa Mill, we sort of used a different type, and I'm thoroughly pleased with the replacement. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, go look at it because it's a new material for us, and I think it just ended up being beautiful.
And to the point, talking about the connectivity with North Lake, Tucker, Lakeside High School, agreed. When I worked at the city of Norcross, the city actually worked on putting out I think it was about a 12 or 16-foot wide trail um, along Beaver Ruin Road, and it connected all of the apartments to the schools that were in the area. And absolutely agreed. That is, I think, a benefit to the community where there's a nice wide trail to get to a destination. In this case, being a school for your kids.
Great. A couple talking about the type of trail going through Mercer's campus. Again, I don't think we have that. Again, that goes back to that type, size, location. What are we looking at for that whole thing? I mean, I feel like a campus is a really great opportunity to maybe do some unique elements. So I don't know, maybe. I think, my director, Chucky Love, sort of artwork. Actually, I was at Fraser Row the other day and they have this really great entry into their park with some graphics. I mean, so I don't know. I think we could be a little bit unique there.
Paige, I should also mention, um, through the Board of Commissioners, I had pushed forward the idea of a small area plan on how to sort of improve from the business sector the area, almost essentially the same area that the Mercer Trail study happened at. And there will be some overlap and some engagement around art and different public arts that can be put in the community. So um, it takes a while sometimes to put all these different planning processes together, but we're at that point where the different plans are starting to come together, and there'll be that overlap where community members will have an opportunity to speak out in more detail as to what they want to see in the community, even beyond the trails. So stay tuned. That'll probably be starting in early 2025.
This is a great question about access to Peachtree Creek Greenway at Shallowford. Again, I don't know offhand. That was a new question. I need to dive into the map. But I'll try to get you an answer on that.
As I recall, around that area,
There.
the Publix would be one of the anchors in that area, but some of the heavy costs, particularly around the Publix location itself, was one of the reasons why I kind of shied away from that area, and then asked that we look at the Mercer area itself first of all.
And then I love this comment. I'm going to sort of mention this, and I think this is great opportunity. Somebody mentions using existing roads and sidewalks as an alternative, and that kind of goes back to those neighborhood questions. I do understand, and that was where I think where the majority of the complaint is having people outside of the neighborhood come and park in your neighborhood to gain access. I do think there's good opportunity if the neighborhood itself, if we want to have a designated, on the already paved road, right? There are other options out there that we can meander through to make the connection, but not have it a place where other citizens or outside citizens are coming and parking in your neighborhood. So again, I think that's a great comment about, using some of the existing infrastructure to make those connections, especially for those residents and neighbors that live in those areas. And again, I think that is a prime opportunity. I wholeheartedly agree with you. Let's see. So there's a question in here about housing. I'm not a housing person. So I don't know, Commissioner, if there's anything that you wanted to add to
If
that.
you could tell me what question you're at, there was a couple more items added into the chat, and I lost my spot here.
Oh, sorry. It's this one here. We need housing going, basically, I think going between office and residential means more families and then I guess more students in the school system. So it's, I guess, talking about housing in the school district.
Hmm. Um, I think that we would probably look towards the comprehensive plan that talks about what the expectations are for housing options. Of course, um, this is a desirable area to live in, and there are always going to be more pressures for people to want to move in here. There'll be pressures for more development opportunities as well. And the trick is finding that right mix. If you have an existing single-family neighborhood, you may not be comfortable with maybe a nice 4 or 5 story multifamily apartment complex being built next to you. But if there was an old office complex that's now not in use, that might be an easier lift for people. And then again, having that connectivity to take you from the multifamily to the grocery store, to the single family, or to school, or any other destination. I think that's ultimately sort of the goal that we're looking to build with this. I
Right.
hope we answered that question for that person.
Okay. So this next one, and this is the first one we've had, and I'm surprised. I always get asked about maintenance of our parks and trails. So what a great question. Is the county prepared to maintain this once it's built? Will it have its own park ranger or just be under care by the main team? So what a great question. So this is going to be a twofold answer for me. Right now, all of our paths are under parks for maintenance, and it is all outsourced to a vendor. It's actually one of the major elements that we're looking into in the comprehensive trails plan. Is that really the way we want to go, or do we want to have dedicated staff in-house? Again, similar to the type size location study, there's pros and cons to both. So that is an option. If this were to be built tomorrow, which again, we all know it's not, it would most likely be outsourced. It would take us some time as a department to staff up. We already have 65 miles of existing trails. So as we continue to build out, that's one thing we're looking at is how to expand sort of park personnel. And then we do have rangers. There was a program that was implemented about 6 years ago. There are 7 rangers total. So again, it would be something that we would need sort of an increase in our personnel. And then sort of the new positions that we've been creating are the park naturalist positions. We now have 4 of those positions within the department. And yes, that would be something that's a dedicated naturalist to the trail area. So all of those are options. And yes, it would fall under both the Parks Division, Park Services for maintenance, and then also the naturalist positions roll up under sort of our recreational programming because they do sort of offer that educational component. And boy, what a great opportunity having access to the ecological benefits at Mercer would that be. So again, I think there's good opportunity there. What a great question. I'm also shocked that usually I get inundated with maintenance questions. So that's the first one.
If I could add in a little
Okay.
extra to that as well, through the Board of Commissioners, I had requested a funding study that looks at how to pay for bus rapid transit along 285. Uh, in that request is also how can we look to other ways to funding trails and talk about maintenance, talk about security, staffing the positions. With a major storm, you'd want to be able to have that trail cleared as quickly as possible. And so those are the things that we're looking into is how do we pay for that? And that should be starting soon. Hopefully, I'm expecting maybe around March of next year, have the results of that study and certainly be willing to share that with the residents so they can take a look at it and see what is discussed and get their comfort level with that.
So there is a question about and comment about permitting. So the comment is basically that they don't feel like that's an obstacle. I would disagree.
Mhm.
If you want to become more familiar with our code and what's required of us, that's all available to the public. If you go to municode.com and specifically look up section 1431, it talks about rises in the floodplain, and what we have to do to mitigate that. There's a lot of engineering and a lot of modeling that goes behind that. So maybe you don't see it as an obstacle, but it is something that is required of us, and it's something that needs to be modeled and engineered. So just don't want everybody to think we're putting a line on a map and submitting it. That's not how that works. Like I said, if you want to familiarize yourself with the codes, and just because we're a county department, we're not exempt from that. If we touch into a wetland or touch into state waters, then there's stream buffer variances that we need to get. And these are requirements of us. That goes through EPD and go through the Army Corps of Engineers. So again, we don't take that lightly, and we are subject to all the regulations that anybody else developing in the county or in the state would be accustomed to. The next is a question about the Rangewood section being completely removed. Again, we don't know. This is just the concept plan. And again, those things will be further discussed once we get into the engineering.
Paige, if I can, someone I actually know from back in my Doraville days asked if I see any problems with the top end bus rapid transit lanes. GDOT is going to build those with or without the bus rapid transit component. And so as a way to help our residents get from one part of the county to another part of the county in a timely fashion, specifically getting through Spaghetti Junction. That is the route that GDOT has decided to follow. And rather than not engage or take advantage of that, I think this is probably the best opportunity to try and get some benefits for our residents from that.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
So next couple questions are kind of other cities' plans and our comprehensive trail plan. So we're actually in the midst of reviewing the first draft of the final plan for the trails plan. So we're getting there. It is a long process, but again, it's we're looking at a whole county network. So this is tied into it. And I think it was a little bit confusing on some of the interactive maps on our website. So it's not in the vision network. So again, that's the broad network for the whole county, that's tied to the CTP, but it is in sort of the smaller networks that this will be included. So yes, once this is included, we'll do that. And then the next question that I have is about tying into the city of Tucker, and that is part of the vision network. That regional connection is just so key for us and ARC, and that is also in the parks comprehensive trail plan. So just be on the lookout for that, that we will be having, we just did this sort of final meeting to the stakeholders. I think it's been about a month. So now we're just getting the plan finalized, and then it will go through its normal channels for adoption.
Paige, if I could, another resident that I'm familiar with, Vicky, she mentions again the idea of utilizing the sewer easements. Again, that's since the county's under the consent decree, we would have to get judges and federal agencies and state agencies to approve any ideas like that. Doesn't mean we can't. It just means that as the county is underneath the consent decree, we just have to be that level extra mindful of where we put impervious surfaces, even if it's within the easement of a sewer system.
The next question, I think it's a great question because I did mention sort of engaging the community during the design phase. I don't have an exact plan on how that's going to work, but know that that is something that we will pursue. Let us sort of, again, we don't even have the proposal yet for the engineering. So I want to talk with that consultant once they're selected and sort of figure out a way to get that done. I would love to say that we had this wonderful website where it was, sort of interactive, and we are working on that as a department. But in the meantime, let me try to figure out some creative ways and talk to them about sort of making that connection with the public, making sure that y'all are engaged in that process.
And again, just to reiterate, the engagement with the public, with you, the residents, to make sure that this is really your plan. Are you comfortable with it? Do you like where it goes? Do you like the material that's being used? Those are all going to be part of the conversations, again, tied into that notion of what does the topography say on how to build out the vision. So absolutely.
Great example of Big Creek Greenway. I don't know why that is hard to say. Yes, we will look at that as an example. I love examples. I think if there's areas that the public enjoys going and it, aesthetically pleasing, and again, takes into all those considerations, more than happy to try to incorporate some of those elements. And then another comment regarding utilizing boardwalks. So yes, again, we were going to be taking all those into consideration. Let's see. So I'm just going to kind of slide through. I want to probably wrap this up if there's anything new. There is a question here about, will the chat questions and comments. I think I know how to do that. I'm going to be honest. I'm one of my people is out on medical leave and I'm not as skilled at this. I'm pretty sure I can download all these. I'm going to do my best. But we've answered about 90% of them, just so you know. Somebody commenting about using public art, which I agree. I think
Absolutely.
public art is a great addition.
Yep. Yep.
Let's see. This is transportation. Oh yes, this is so correct. Dave Pelton is the director of transportation, and yes, he is involved in all things transportation. Another question about the Rangewood Trail, and again, I just don't have the map right in front of me. I'm sorry. I will get an answer on that.
I think
Um,
the Rangewood question was relating to connectivity to the neighborhoods. Um, from what was laid out, I think the conversation is to sort of stay away from the neighborhood as much as possible
okay.
this time.
So let's see. So, yeah, so I'm gonna give you an email address and then somebody asked about the Muni code and I'll get there too. Let's see. Uh, so somebody had asked a question about, do you intend to submit variances for buffer widths and setbacks? We're required to submit a variance if it's in the stream buffer. I'm not sure if that was your question, but yes, we have to. If it comes within the state buffer is 25 feet, and then the county actually goes beyond that. So we were required for 2 variances if we go into the stream buffer. We try to stay out of floodways, not floodplains, floodways, and those are different, and also buffers. So, but again, if we encroach, we're required to. Okay, so I am going to now, I think the last slide, I'm almost positive. Let me get out of this. And I don't want to lose any of these because I am going to still try to download these. Okay. So last but not least, here is an email. So if you do not think I answered your question, and honestly, if you say to me, if I told you I don't know the answer, if you want to email me your question again, I'm okay with that. I can use all the help I can get. So email this address, and I will try to respond directly back if it was something you asked and I was like, I just don't know right now. Please make sure you email us any further questions at this email. And then what I'm going to do is the Muni code. It's MUNICODE.com. It's all one word, municode.com. A lot of people don't know it exists, but basically those are all of the county codes and ordinances for all of DeKalb County. It's actually for the state of Georgia. So when you go in there, you'll have to pick DeKalb County. There's actually a whole section for parks codes. Those are, our codes, and then also a whole section pertaining to planning and sustainability. And the section that I referred to specifically was 14.31, which talks about floodways and floodplains and what happens when you raise the water in those areas. And we do have to offset that. So that is, it's a tremendous amount of work that we do for that. So that's what I was referring to. So Commissioner, I was going to let you have closing remarks. But first, thank you for joining us, and thank you to all the citizens that were here tonight. I really appreciate the tremendous amount of feedback that we received tonight.
All right. Well, thank you, Paige. Thank you for hosting this. Much appreciated. To the residents, I want to say thank you very much for being engaged. Obviously, the advocates who wanted to see trails, I hope you guys have something that you're happy with. For the people that were concerned about the location of the trails, I hope that you realize that we did acknowledge your concerns and tried to back this out in areas that were more acceptable to the residents that would be more likely affected by that. With that said, just be short and sweet. Trails is one of the things that I ran down back in 2020, and it's the idea of getting connectivity. As county commissioner, let me back up. Let me say, as a Doraville councilman, I realized that we have to work together. So at a municipal level, you have to work with your surrounding neighboring jurisdictions. At the county level, truly, this is sort of the opportunity to say, acknowledge the cities for the jurisdictions and the responsibilities they have. And then when we can, push that conversation into how can we connect a Chamblee resident or a Doraville resident or a Brookhaven resident, Stonecrest, Stone Mountain, still DeKalb County residents, still have a voice in the government that DeKalb County is and the direction that it goes in. And so this is really a great opportunity, a great excuse for us to talk with one another beyond, just the usual, my area is fine and we're not going to worry about anything else. So really the goal is to bring that bigger connectivity, that bigger conversation between us all as DeKalb County residents. And I think trails is the easiest way to do that. Of course, we have some other pressing topics out there as well that we'll be talking about. But I think trails is a win for everybody. So thank you all for your time this evening. Paige, again, thank you for agreeing to a fourth meeting and doing it in a way that's easy on the budget. Appreciate that as well. So thank you.
Anytime. Thank you. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone. We'll talk.